The Venus Project is an organization that proposes a feasible plan of action for social change, one that works towards a peaceful and sustainable global civilization. It outlines an alternative to strive toward, where human rights are no longer paper proclamations, but a way of life. The Venus Project operates out of a 21.5-acre research center located in Venus, Florida. When one considers the enormity of the challenges facing society today, we can safely conclude that the time is long overdue for us to re-examine our values and to reflect upon and evaluate some of the underlying issues and assumptions we have as a society. This self-analysis calls into question the very nature of what it means to be human, what it means to be a member of a civilization, and what choices we can make today to ensure a prosperous future for all the world's people. At present, we are left with very few alternatives. The answers of yesterday are no longer relevant. Either we continue as we have been with our outmoded social customs and habits of thought, in which case our future will be threatened, or we can apply a more appropriate set of values that are relevant to an emergent society. Experience tells us that human behavior can be modified either towards constructive or destructive activity. This is what the Venus Project is all about, directing our technology and resources towards the positive for the maximum benefit of people and the planet, and seeking out new ways of thinking and living that emphasize and celebrate the vast potential of the human spirit. We have the tools at hand to design and build a future that is worthy of the human potential. The Venus Project presents a bold, new direction for humanity that entails nothing less than the total redesign of our culture. What follows is not an attempt to predict what will be done, only what could be done. The responsibility for our future is in our hands and depends on the decisions that we make today. The greatest resource that is available today is our own ingenuity. While social reformers and think tanks formulate strategies that treat only superficial symptoms without touching the basic social operation, the Venus Project approaches these problems somewhat differently. We feel we cannot eliminate these problems within the framework of the present political and monetary establishment. It would take too many years to accomplish any significant change. Most likely, they would be watered down and thinned out to such an extent that the changes would be indistinguishable. The Venus Project advocates an alternative vision for a sustainable new world civilization unlike any social system that has gone before. Although this description is it's highly condensed, it is based upon years of study and experimental research by many, many people from many scientific disciplines. It calls for a straightforward redesign of our culture in which the age-old inadequacies of war, poverty, hunger, debt, and unnecessary human suffering are viewed not only as avoidable, but totally unacceptable.
The major difference between cybernetic organisms and human systems. A lot of people think that programming is exactly the same in people and robotics. It is not. The major difference is that you can design a robot to walk over, pick up an object, put it in another place. But if the robot, before it even moves, if you put the object in the place the robot was going to put it in, it would still walk over and grab nothing in particular. Do you understand that? That's programmed. The difference between human systems and robots, it's not linear. When he sees a triangle, presses a button, he gets lubricated. But he doesn't feel good when he gets lubricated. So there's no reason to retain that action. It's only when a human touches something and they feel good touching it that they repeat it. A robot cannot touch something and say, hey, that feels good. They can reach out, do that, and pull it back, but they can't make anything of it. Do you understand that? The reason I say, do you understand that, is because there's so much conflict today about robots and people. Will robots take over? Not if they're programmed not to take over. Human beings have, some people believe, 10 to 15 billion neurons. A robot has hundreds of thousands of associates, not billions. So if you learn that a cup gives you water, anything that looks like a cup might support water. We can deviate from our programming. Our programming appears rigid, but alongside of it is associative memory. That I touched it and I felt pain. I touched the other thing and I didn't feel pain. I got something. A robot never looks at a thing and says, that's interesting. That's a major difference between programmed behavior and human programming. Humans have a lot of associations prior to programming. So the other associations, if it reminds them of the other, he can deviate. They don't know how to program a robot to say, what have we here? Because a robot, the word, what have we here, doesn't mean anything to a robot. It means something to a human being. But if a robot is self-programming, then the reason for a robot's actions are very different than human systems. A robot doesn't want to know why some tires wear out faster than others. So he doesn't take a microscope and looks at the rubber under a microscope. A robot is not equipped that way. They don't have pleasure and pain. If they had pleasure and pain, if they did, they would have preferences. So when people say, do you think the robots will take over? There's no basis for it if they're programmed a certain way. What is a resource-based economy? A resource-based economy is entirely different than anything that has ever existed in the past. Most decisions were made by kings, politicians, statesmen, but nothing based upon resources. To better understand the meaning of a resource-based economy, picture an island somewhere in the South Pacific, and you really want to know, how many people can that island support, and to what degree can the extravagance of the island be maintained. First, you have to know how much wood there is, how much water, how much arable land. Once you do a survey of the resources of that island, that can best be the method for determining how many people it will support. If the materials do not exist, you can only design a culture based upon the materials that do exist. You can only grow food based upon the arable land area and the water surrounding the island, the fish, crustaceans, all the other things. So you really need technical competence in order to arrive at decisions that make sense. You cannot arrive at decisions that make sense by consensus, by asking people what they want. You have to find out what the island has to offer, and that's what you can determine the future by. Politicians have opinions about everything and information about nothing in particular. Therefore, you understand that the decisions are not made by the majority of people, they're made by the majority of people that have technical competence, that have information in the areas you wish to excel in, and methods of scientific scales of performance. If you have 1 million sincere people that have no technical competence, I can assure you nothing can be accomplished. So you have to ask the questions: can we build a society of sustainability? If you have no information as to the availability of resources, you cannot undertake such a project. That's the function of research labs, to make alternative materials that will substitute for lack of materials. Technicians do not tell you what to do or how to live. They merely carry out the function of designing elevators, transportation units, bridges, housing systems. They do not tell people what to do, what to think, or how to live. That's the mistake that most people make. They think that a resource-based economy has technicians that also tell you what lifestyle to use. No, they don't. The resources determine that. All that the technicians do is build a system that can utilize those resources for the benefit of all the people involved. It has to be global, so people will have access to more things than they've ever had in a monetary system. More things and more opportunities will be available. All of the cities are designed to utilize a minimum amount of energy for maximum service. The resource-based economy has millions of slaves, but they're machines. And machines do repetitive, boring, and dangerous jobs. That's what the machines are for. They're not to put you out of work. If they can turn things out faster than you, we don't need you working. In fact, we don't want you working in an industrial plant. We want you to go back to school and study whatever you're interested in, whatever you think you'd like to study, whatever you feel you'd like to understand better. Unfortunately, money doesn't represent things in existence. If you set a value on every tree, every inch of arable land, all the water, and you printed money proportionate to the resources, so that the money represents resources, then it can have meaning. But today, that is not accomplished. Although they may tell you that demand will really bring about these things. No, demand doesn't bring about the things, available resources do. And if money doesn't represent available resources, it has no basis for social management. No basis for social management. Animals do not grow smarter and wiser. Animals that are born with lack of vision die out in the visual field. So nature kills 10,000 animals for each one it produces. I better do that with the worm. If you can spread this idea into all areas. Worms are born, I don't know what I got this. This is a drawing of a worm. The worm has light cells all over its body. They're very weak. They're eyes, but they're early stages of the eye. So when this worm sticks its front end out of the ground and a bird sees it, it picks it off. But if it's born with more light cells up here, just a few more than this, and a bird's shadow comes, it retracts. And then eventually all the worms that survive have light cells over here. The eye is an organization of light cells. It starts out with light cells all over. But the worms that survive are the worms with the light cell at the leading edge. If they're at the trailing edge, it doesn't survive. When a bird lands with a worm and the other birds open their mouth, I did this years ago. The bird that moves the most with the mouth open gets all the worms.
Gotcha.
It doesn't feed all the birds.
Feeds the most active.
So I made a plastic bird with the mouth wide open on a spring that moved more, and the bird put all the worms in there. That's when I became a mechanist. I believe that human beings cannot think or reason. They're mechanisms that respond to the environment because they have a wide range of responding senses. So I looked at robots the same way, but we're organic. We get hungry, so we hunt. Robots don't. Robots don't say, I need lubrication, so I'm going to behave a certain way. They don't care whether you're lubricated or not. So they don't evolve. No man has been able to make a robot that says, just a minute. I feel good doing that. Robots don't feel good or bad. When a wolf has incisors, he can tear off bigger pieces of meat. If he swallows it faster, he can survive starvation. So animals do not chew their food. They rip off the meat and swallow it whole, just as it is. I don't know if you noticed that. That animal will survive in scarcity. The animal that tears the meat off and chews on it won't be of enough food. So the animals tear it apart fast. And they don't outgrow that. The animals born with the larger fangs survive. Those with shorter fangs don't get a bigger piece of the meat. Animal life has no purpose, is what I'm trying to say. There's no purpose to eyes, ears, teeth, or anything. If you're born with things that work under those conditions, you survive. If you're born, say, with let's say, a more rational mind, and you're rational about everything, you can't live. You might leave a little food for your young. If a bird doesn't feed its young, let's say it just eats the food, that species is gone. A bird that doesn't take care of its young, birds are not born to take care of their young. They say they instinctively take care of their young. The birds that don't feed their young are dead. They're gone. It's very hard to accept that humans are machines. They're responding organisms. Very difficult. And people that used to attend my seminars for years would write songs about them, a responding organism, a bundle of tropisms. You know, and they couldn't get along with normal people. You must understand that. Since I've been attending your sessions, I'm losing my friends. I said, you're not losing your friends. You're losing people that are hard-headed, hardwired. But you'll have to change people to get along with them. I'm saying that all things are shoved by something else. There's nothing, although we can't see the wire up our ass connected to the sun, we depend on the sun, the radiant energy of the sun. You may not see the forces that move you. Nutrition, different food combinations, strengthen your fingernails, lack of it makes them soft and they crack. You don't know how your body operates But if you study nutrition and physical degeneration, you know more about the body. You never know everything. The word everything is a stupid word. It implies that there is such a thing as everything. When you get into the mechanistic point of view, all that the mechanist says is that all things are shoved by other things. There's no prime source of that movement. In other words, if this begins to roll, it means the table is not level.
Right.
Nothing moves of itself. Plants do not grow. They depend on sunlight, water, moisture, soil, temperature, many different things. So there's no prime mover. When I say, how did the universe begin? That's a stupid question. It assumes a beginning. A seed, they say, is the beginning of a plant. How do you know it's not the end product? Why do you call it the beginning? Do you understand what I'm saying? Man projects like hell, including scientists. There's no good, no bad, no smart people, no dumb people. There are people that have less tools than you do. You might have better tools. If a girl falls in love with a taller guy than you, because she likes tall people, and you get mad at her, you don't understand the effects of environment. When you understand, you'll never dislike anybody or hate them. You'll understand where they're coming from. And that will stop a lot of crime, that's what I mean by we're not educated. I hope you know what I mean now. We're not given that. Well, I never heard of Fresco. He has no PhD. He never graduated junior grade school. Therefore, fuck Fresco. You're a follower of some fucking fraudulent guy. That's what they'll tell you if you talk to normal people. But if you understand what I'm saying, you'll only understand those things that have parallel, that you have experience with. I can't talk to anybody. They would hate me, you know what I mean? And if I talk to scientists, they'd say, well, where the hell do you get your ideas from? You know, I got mine by hard work. So did I get it. I worked very hard, questioning everything, trying to. There are some of us that can accept a wider range of behavior due to background. If you don't have this background, if you've never been here, you'll retain what you've been given. But from now on, you're poisoned. You can't go back to the old way of thinking. You'll never be able to go back. There are no roads to yesterday. There are no roads to yesterday.
Were you once Christian?
Yes. I was once a believer in God. Let's say that. I believe there's somebody that made the world, because that's what they told me.
What made you change your mind?
A motion picture called The Ten Commandments. You ever hear of it?
Yeah.
By Cecil B. DeMille.
I saw it.
With the old one, the original. And I came home and I said to my older brother, I don't understand the Egyptians. Didn't they believe in the same God we believe in? He said, no, maybe they were atheists. My brother was a little older. And I said, what's an atheist? Well, atheists believe that animals evolved. The giraffes ate things and made a longer neck, and animals went through evolution. He knew a little bit about evolution. And from my background at that time, that made more sense. I had enough of background. I said, gee, maybe there isn't a God. And I began to talk to people. They said, you're nuts. There's got to be a God. And then I read books on atheism a little bit, and it made more sense than God making a man and a woman out of clay, earth, and he turned them loose in the Garden of Eden. That would sound more like a fairy tale. I had enough of a background to make it. If I didn't, I would have rejected it. And the minister said it rains to make the plants grow. I said, why does it rain at sea? I really wanted to know. I was not an atheist. So he said, hold down your hands and beat me. And I began to doubt the wisdom of that guy. Then he said, God works in strange ways. After we die, we'll know why certain things happen. Today you won't understand it. So I bought the package. And then I said, why does a flood drown children? They've had no experience. And he said, because the Lord works in strange ways. We may not know that, but there's a reason for everything. And then he gave me some reasons. He did. He says, a man he met went blind due to cataracts. And the blind man said, since I was blind, I realized a lot of things that I didn't appreciate in the past. So he says, the purpose of that guy going blind was to give him the realization of how wonderful it is to have sight, and then how wonderful it is to have senses.
Right.
So there's a reason for everything, and that stalled my ability to think things out. You know, it was a good example. And then so going on, I didn't find blind men any particularly smarter than anyone else. This particular blind man that he quoted, yes, he did. But there are many people that have a negative experience and makes them more negative.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's very hard to be objective. And I found that conflict in the early stages of beginning to question things. I found, well, it's better that I go to church once a month, you know, not give it up entirely. So I said, well, God would know I was false then I didn't have to go once a month. Because I says, I can't put it over on God. So then I learned more about evolution and learned more about God sacrificing his son. And if he knows everything, he would know that his son would be crucified. Then it didn't make sense. I began to question that whole pattern. It went in circles, you know what I mean? And I pulled out. But if I didn't question the patterns, I don't think I could make it. And if I wasn't shoved further enough along, I wouldn't have questioned anything. So here you're being shoved, and from now on, you will question more things, question more things. What are they fighting for? If the war sells munitions, submarines, yet you take the lives of American soldiers and put them up to defend the United States. Are they defending the United States, or are they defending the social institutions, the war factories, the war industries? Do you see what I mean? So merely marching in front of the stock market or the stock exchange is only part of this system. The public pays taxes. They support the police, the army, the war weapons, everything. The very rich pay very little taxes, yet they control the police, and they control the National Guard, and they control the army. It's the public that pays the police a salary. They don't know who the hell they're serving. When they serve Wall Street, that means the money people really control the country, not the public. And 80% of the people say they're not satisfied with the government's decisions. So if you walk in front of the stock exchange and you say that these people are corrupt, the whole system is corrupt. You have to point out these things. They want to cut Medicare for the poor. What do you suggest as an alternative? Let them die? Bring that up. What do you suggest? The guy that says, well, we don't want to give people free medical care. What do you want them to do, die? Yes or no? Well, they can't answer that. So pin them down. When they say, we love this country, our boys are out there fighting, giving up their lives for the country, don't you think we ought to take the profit out of war also? Just like the guys don't make money fighting over there, they get a minimum wage fighting. And then when you figure out the cost of war, all the aircraft carriers, all the airplanes, all the cities destroyed, and all the nations wiped out, it's cheaper to take that money and build new cities all over the world, helping people to understand the benefits of technology and knowledge. The whole country is involved in exploitation. If you're a dentist, you make money on me if I need a root canal. If you dent your automobile, somebody makes money straightening out the fenders. So everything is profitable, and we want that change. We want the world to concern itself with people and taking care of the environment. It's the greatest gift we have. The trees, the topsoil, the oceans. Where ships, luxury liners, empty their bills into the ocean. That means the oil and all this stuff, they pump it in the ocean. The oceans are the toilet of the world. All big hotels pump their fecal matter out into the oceans. So what do you expect from that? Do you expect the dolphins to live on healthy lives? They can't. And if you use genetic manipulation without a long-term study of the effects of it, you're going to hurt people. It's the system, not Wall Street. The system produces all that. Therefore, we offer an alternative system, and this is what it is. To declare the earth the common heritage of all the world's people. And for those of you that are religious, God didn't make the earth for the Greeks, or the Polacks, or the Jews, or the French. He made it for all the people of the world. Use religion. Use it that way. You can find that in the Bible. Love your enemy, it says. It says, thou shalt not kill, in all Bibles. And yet people don't seem to follow that. So apparently they don't understand what they're reading. And they believe in honesty and good and fair play. Where did we get this land? We stole it from the Indians. And women who disagreed were burned as witches in Salem, Massachusetts. And the Ku Klux Klan in America had 3 million members. If you don't bring that up, that's the problem. The problem is that freedom and individual opinions can become dangerous. I asked many people years ago whether they thought man will ever get to the moon. They said, not in 1,000 years. I said, you know anything about rockets? No. You know anything about space travel? No. Well, how do you formulate that? How come we give everybody a right to their own opinion? Why don't you give them access to information? And so essentially, you have to educate people. Educate people. It seems that all people that kill and murder are really enacting the way movies, all our cowboy pictures, never sit down and discuss anything. They shoot people. Can't get 2 guns, they shoot people. And the Indians were fighting for their land. We stole it from them. But we shoot Indians. And we show the guys in the covered wagons, you know. What the hell are you taking their land away from? Why don't you ask them whether we can settle down here? They said no. We didn't ask them, we took it. And we drove the Indians to the desert region. They're still looking for justice. The Indians aren't going to get justice because they have no power. And so if they get an Indian in the Congress, if he doesn't conform to the views of the congressman, they'll move him out. Do you understand? Now, as long as sports exist, racing cars, football, baseball, they act as detractors. They detract people from the real issues. They don't even know what the real issues are. The real issues is to take care of this God-given earth, if you're talking to them. To take care of nature. God put the trees here to give us oxygen. We give out carbon dioxide, the trees use that. Use religion. Whatever, wherever they're at, talk to them. Say it's not going to change anything if you march in front of Wall Street, but if you talk to other people and get a sufficient amount of people organized to demand the Venus Project, then when 80% of the people don't trust their government anymore, they don't trust what the Republicans say about the Democrats, what the Democrats say about the Republicans. They just don't feel comfortable. And they don't know what else to do. So they would like to, like the Arabs, change the culture. But what do you change it to? They don't know. So if they succeed in changing the culture, it'll revert back to the old values. Unless you teach them about the new value system. Then they say, well, they've tried that for years and it never worked. Who tried it? When did they try it? Pin them down. Well, I don't know who, but they say, I'm not interested in your opinion, I want facts. Okay? And they'll try to detract you. They'll say, well, it'll kill incentive. Have you ever tried it? No, Russia has. Well, Russia didn't have the resources we had, and they didn't steal the land. It was their land. But Russia had men pulling boats along the Volga River. Did you know that? They had no power system. And life was so miserable for the majority of people, they took to an ideal was that maybe if the people owned the means of production, they wouldn't hurt each other. So they tried a social experiment and they failed, because they didn't know how precisely to carry it out to attain what they wanted. If the socialists got into power, they'd be concerned about the working man. And if automation came up, they said, no, we'd rather have people working. And other nations will pass us by, surpass us, because they put in automation. You have to, when you get new machines that work everything in the factory, let's say you got 3,000 people working in it, now you got 1,500, and machines assembling cars. You have to point out that if new machines come in, you'll get the workers together and say, instead of working 8 hours, you now work 4 hours a day. And you, instead of getting a week off every year, you get 2 months off with your family, and they can pay. That's what the machines do. But if the machines cause you to lose your job, you're going to hate machines. But machines, when used intelligently, if they turn out 50 times more than a man can turn out, industry will use machines. They don't give a shit about people. They don't care whether they lay off 400 people, or 500, or 3,000, if they make more money doing it. So you begin to design integrated systems. You know what that means? That you take in the whole factor and say, instead of selling an air conditioner to every home, we pipe air-conditioned air all around and you absorb what you want. You turn it on. That's much cheaper than selling an air conditioner or a lawnmower to 5,000 houses. The lawnmower people would love to do that, to sell a lawnmower to each house. Instead of that, you have 4 or 5 giant lawnmowers that take care of the whole area. Do you understand that? So they say, do we have enough resources? We don't, using it the way it's used today. A lawnmower, air conditioner hanging out of every window. You know, that's not no way to do things. And then you have 1,000 farms growing the same thing. You have farms, large farms, industrial farms, without genetic engineering, unless it's been tested for many years to make sure there's no negative effects. The system I'm talking about doesn't profit anyone to lie. And everybody has access to books, school, free of charge, and there's no taxation. And if you don't like that system, what are you, an atheist? You know, you approach religious people that way. Because this is what God wants. It's called the brotherhood of man. This doesn't differ from any religious teaching. It really doesn't. So if you're with normal people, if they say, will you come to the Presbyterian Church and give a presentation, do it in that guise. And if you go to a bunch of humanists that are atheists, you don't need to use religion. You can just point out the shortcomings. I think I told you about the girl who came with me with a whip and handcuffs, and she says, I like to be whipped and handcuffed to the bed. She was a Catholic and couldn't think of having sex without force. Then it's not her fault. So she always dreamt of guys holding her down and making love to her. And that was legitimate to her. But if she thought of, gee, having sex, that was sinful. So is she bad? No. Is she wrong? No. She's brought up under different circumstances. It takes a long while to learn that. It's much easier to get mad at people. When you get mad at them, you feel relieved. But in the future, when you understand that's where they're coming from, you don't get mad. You don't get mad. In the future, when you understand, you don't get mad.
We feel it's really important to do a major motion picture now to get to the general public, to introduce to them what science and technology can do under the direction of the Venus Project within a resource-based economy.
I think a motion picture can be played over and over again. It can be translated into many different languages, and it could do far more than my personal lectures because it travels all over the world. And in a motion picture, you can answer all the questions that people ask.
We also feel while Jacques is still alive, he is the best person to put this film together. He has worked all his life to arrive at this direction. He hasn't just read books. He has experimented and worked with people and worked with technology and showed just how a resource-based economy can function and what it will look like. So to us, it's very important to have Jacques involved in this film.
The basic ideas for the film are laid out precisely, and they are laid out in accordance with the plans of the Venus Project. If you don't have a public prepared to accept the Venus Project, there is no other way.
All of the future scenarios in science fiction films are detrimental, are scary, are technology overcoming and killing people, dictatorial governments, and technology watching your every move. This is quite the opposite of the Venus Project for anybody who knows about it. And this is what we want to get across to the public, that you don't have to be afraid of technology. We want to show how the methods of science can be used to enhance everyone's life and preserve the environment.
If we spent the money any other way, I don't think it would be as effective. We need a large following to get this implemented.
People don't know what's missing. They don't know any other system. So we want to show life in a resource-based economy, then show flashbacks of how we get from here to there, and do it in an entertaining way so we could bring the public along with it.
The Venus Project story is already fairly explicit, and what we need perhaps from a writer is putting it in terms that might be easily understood or acceptable.
It will have a lot of CGI in it, which is expensive because it does take place in the future.
But it depends on when and what kind of funds we get. That will dictate, say, the type of script. The more funding, the more elaboration. That depends on what people do to help support the project.
We would have information on the internet as to how much has come in, where it's going to, and we have to do this because we're aiming to get the donations through our nonprofit 501c3 organization called Future by Design, and lawfully everything has to be transparent, and it would be.
If we do make a profit, we will build the first city, or we will do additional films, shorter films with many.
People will walk out of this film with a definite direction to work towards, and knowing the difference between what they have today and the possibilities of the future within a resource-based economy. We want them to understand it so much so they walk out and say, why don't we live like this today? Why don't we live like this today?
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.